Joining us right now, Senator Roy Blunt, who has been involved, of course, he's been in with the immigration stuff, the Obamacare stuff, and with the IRS scandal as well. Good afternoon to you, Senator.
Hey, Dan, it's good to be with you.
Of course. I was talking actually the other day with a member of your staff because you recently gave an interview to the New York Times about the IRS, and apparently, what did they do to your remarks when you were doing an interview with them? Because they were claiming that you said that the president in no way was targeting conservatives and all of this other stuff.
Which of course, even in the article they wrote, that's not what I said at all. What I said in the article they wrote in the direct quote was, I don't have any reason to believe that there wasn't targeting of conservatives. In fact, I believe there was, and in a op-ed that I had in the Daily Caller a month or so ago, talked about the conservative groups as well as the adoptive parents and others who clearly had been targeted for odd reasons by the IRS. And what they did when I said, well, presidents always act like they're not having to do anything with the IRS, they suggested that somehow that meant that the president wasn't. And I think all you had to do was read the quote that they actually used to see that that wasn't what I believed at all.
Right.
What we need to figure out ways to provide better protections for American taxpayers, Americans dealing with government agencies of all kinds. And in fact, I'm working on some legislation right now that we'll be announcing in a few days that I think will do some of those kinds of things and begin to level the playing field a little bit so that the citizen has the protection they need rather than all the protections being on the side of the government as well as all the money being on the side of the government.
Right. I mean, what recourse do private citizens have, especially, you highlighted, and I know this is something that hits close to your heart, a lot of these adoptive families and adoptive organizations, they were targeted by the IRS, which I thought was just absolutely mystifying. They were heavily targeted as well.
I thought it was stunning. I was told that they looked at 100% of everybody that took the adoption tax credit. I don't know if that's right or not, but the actual advocate for taxpayers that works for the IRS said that they audited 69% of all the families that took the adoption tax credit. In other words, that was just apparently a gateway to be audited. If you took the adoption tax credit, we're going to look at everything you turned in, and they did. And my belief is that the 31% they didn't look at were the 31% that had so little income that even the IRS believed that nothing was going to happen there. But no surprise when they audited all these adoptive families, they got virtually no money. It is not a group that you would assume would be cheating the federal government, and as it turns out, they weren't cheating the federal government.
Right, absolutely. Well, and we know too that no one, the FBI, in doing investigations into this, no one has actually contacted any of the Tea Party groups, any of these adoptive families or organizations, or any of these other groups that were unfairly targeted by the IRS. They say they're going to get to the bottom of this, but they've made no effort to reach out to any of the individuals they persecuted.
That's right, and the pro-Israel groups that disagreed with the president's Middle East policies were obviously targeted as well. And you know what I think is a bigger thing that happens here? In a democracy, government governs based on the fact that people have some reason to trust the government. In repressive governments do things like this, where they try to use their power and their bullying tactics. And what we've seen in America for generations now is probably the greatest voluntary compliance with a tax code that most of us don't agree with in total. But we think, well, it's the law and we're supposed to comply with the law, and we do that voluntarily. But I will tell you, Dana, when the government starts treating people unfairly, people begin to wonder just how fair they should be with the government.
Right, absolutely. I know as well you've been speaking out about this delayed implementation of Obamacare that the administration has come down with this past couple of weeks. Now, the employer mandate, don't you, even though you've had Stephanie Cutter and members of the Obama administration trying to spin this as Republicans are so terrified of Obamacare, isn't this essentially Democrats in this administration waving a giant white flag of failure that they're refusing to implement this before elections?
I think it is. And you know what we saw before the 2012 elections was none of the thousands of pages of regulations that came out as soon as Election Day was over. Nobody saw those regulations before Election Day in 2012. Now the administration doesn't want businesses to have to comply as employers with the law before Election Day in 2014. You and I have both said since the very start of this debate that this is a plan that will not work. Mm-hmm. And I think as you look at the record, the long-term care provisions, the government decided a couple of years ago, well, that won't work, which, again, I said in the committee hearing that wouldn't work whenever I was a House member. The business exchanges that were supposed to be available January 1, they announced a few months ago, well, those won't be available till January 1 of the next year. This requirement, and then the other thing they did, besides waiving the requirement for businesses to comply with the law, is that they said individuals that get payment assistance under this new taxpayer-provided benefit can self-verify their income. There's no requirement to produce your tax returns. You just get to say, well, I think I'm going to make about $30,000 this year. What does that qualify me to get in terms of a government benefit? So, again, the Obama administration is trying to give away all the candy and not make anybody eat their spinach and hope that turns out to be good for them on Election Day. I think it's very Election Day focused, and believe me, if they thought this was going to be a popular thing, they'd be wanting to get it out there before Election Day instead of wanting to keep holding it back from one election to the next.
Well, and they said, Senator, people are out there dying in the streets. I remember that, all those speeches that were on the floor of the Senate and the House and everything else. And it just, if they cared that much about it and they think it's so successful, I'm wondering why we don't have more elected officials calling on their bluff, saying, well, just implement the full thing. Implement it if it's so successful, because I know that there's a talk about permanently delaying it. Why don't we just call their bluff and say, okay, well, come on, implement the full thing if it's that successful?
Well, I have some reason to believe you could be right on that, and my concern about continuing to put off the implementation is that by the time you get to where you're going to implement this plan that won't work, the other healthcare system is so damaged that you can't really rally around it like we still could today or maybe a year from today. But you wonder, you see us coming to a point where the Obama administration is very likely to say, look, this private sector solution where everybody would get insurance, that didn't work, so really the only alternative is a single-payer system. And the alternative to that would be, no, let's make the old healthcare system that we had that was working, let's make it work even better. But if it's so damaged by that date that you can't make that argument credibly, right, then maybe their plan is there's only one choice, and it would be the wrong choice for America. And I'm going to do everything I can to see that that's not the choice we come down to.
Do you think the House should move to, and I know with you being the Senate, obviously you don't control what goes on in the House, but do you think that your Republican brethren in the House, so to speak, should move to perhaps defund this?
I think so. I voted today in the Appropriations Committee, and again, we're in the minority in the Senate, but all the Republicans, all 15 Republicans, 14 Republicans voted not to fund, and the 16 Democrats voted to go ahead and fund. We voted not to fund either the employer mandate, which the president says he's not going to enforce anyway, or the individual requirement, which would allow both the taxpayer money to go to people to buy their insurance, and maybe more importantly would require the penalties to go to families that are struggling anyway if they can't afford to buy insurance under this new, more expensive system.
Right, yeah.
So I voted twice today to do exactly that, and I would hope the House will follow suit, though, again, the President of the United States can, and I assume would, stop any real effort to reverse this, except his effort to not let people know what's really going to happen until maybe it's too late.
Right. Elections do have consequences. Last quick question for you, Senator. I know you have a busy schedule, and we appreciate your time today. On the immigration front, because this has been a battle in the Senate, it's shaping up to be a very big battle in the House. Were you completely happy with what the so-called Gang of Eight came out with? If you weren't happy with it, what were your biggest concerns about
this?
Well,
I wasn't happy with it, and I didn't vote for it, though. By the time we got to the vote, it was twice as big a bill as it was when they introduced it. But I wasn't for it when they introduced it, because I think to solve all the problems, you first have to solve the biggest problem, which is controlling the border. And once you do that, Dana, I actually think people would be pretty reasonable about the other two issues. What do you do with people who are in the country? How do you either send them home or let them stay? Citizenship or not, that's another discussion that you don't even have to have.
Right.
And what are the real workforce needs of the country? Those things I think you could deal with in a much more meaningful way if you knew the problem was solved at the border itself, both at the border and at the hiring desk where people can't work in the country who aren't legally here to legally work, and where people aren't coming across the borders, whether it's to just get a job or to do something that might endanger Americans. I think you have to secure the border first. That appears to be the path that the House of Representatives is headed down.
I hope so.
And I think that's the way to solve all of these problems, is to solve them one at a time.
Right. I worry about the piecemealing of it, though, because I keep thinking, well, what's actually going to make it to Obama's desk? Something about securing the border or a pathway to citizenship. And I just can't have confidence that one legislation, one bill about securing the border would make it up there. That's my concern with it. But I don't know.
Well, you and I are both concerned that the president would want to do this the right way.
Oh, yeah.
But that I think we do share a sense that if you could secure the border, that is the thing to do first.
Yeah, but that's presupposing that he's on our side, though.
It presupposes that he or others who just want to create a pathway to citizenship for people who are here without stopping the inflow. In fact, one of the reasons that I thought was the most compelling to be against this was the Congressional Budget Office said if we didn't pass this bill, that 10 million people would come in over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
If we did pass this bill, 7.5 million people would come in over the next 10 years illegally.
Yeah,
that doesn't sound like much of a solution to me.
No.
These are problems we need to solve, not just continue to act like we're concerned about when we're really not.
Absolutely. Senator Roy Blunt, we appreciate your time today, sir. And
great to talk to you. See you soon.
Thanks so much.